What's up, everybody? This is the Hedge Mage, and welcome back to another video. And for part two of our spoiler roundup of all the new commons from Outlaws of Thunder Junction that got previewed last week. So we're gonna be doing the same thing we did yesterday. We're just kind of looking at each card, giving my initial thoughts on it, keeping it pretty brief, not going too in depth. So if that sounds interesting to you, stick around for that. As always, if you enjoy the content I create, if you could leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate it. With that said, let's get into it. So the first card we're looking at today is Oasis Gardener for 3 generic. You get an artifact creature Scarecrow. When Oasis Gardener enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. It is a 2/2. Honestly, think this is probably commander only. Could probably see some play in limited if there's a lot of multicolored piles going on, but generally I don't see this getting played in constructed. Next, we have Outlaw's Fury for 2 generic and a red. Get an instant. Creatures you control get +2/+0 until end of turn. If you control an outlaw, exile the top card of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. Honestly, this seems remotely playable, though again, it's probably going to see more play in EDH or Pauper EDH piles. Um, there's definitely a lot of go wide strategies out there, and the fact that you get to see a new card and you basically get to draw it. Not quite as good as drawing it, because then you get to keep it till whenever you decide to play it. You have a bit of a time limit here with, the sort of impulse effect. But generally, this is, I think, a pretty evenly costed card. I think it is fair in what it does, though it's also not so good to where I'm like, this is going to be an immediate staple. Next, we have Patient Naturalist for 2 generic and a green. You get a Human Scout. When Patient Naturalist enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards. Put a land card from among the mill cards into your hand. If you can't, create a treasure token. So we already have, I believe it's Satyr Wayfinder, I think, that kind of does the same thing for 1 less mana. You don't get a treasure token if you miss a land, though. This kind of makes sure that you do get some type of mana out of the deal. Though it is a 3 mana card. If this was a 2 mana card and maybe was just like a 2/1, for example, I'd probably be pretty excited about it. But at 3 mana, it's just, I think, a little too high for most of the decks in the current meta. Next, we have Peerless Rope Master for 4 generic and a blue. You get a human rogue when Peerless Rope Master enters the battlefield. Return up to 1 target tap creature to its owner's hand, and it is a 4/4, and I would say completely unplayable, even though I do generally like enter the battlefield effects. Next we have a Quilled Charger for 3 generic and a red. You get a Porcupine Mount. When a Quilled Charger attacks while saddled, it gets +1/+2 and gains Menace until end of turn, and it has Saddle too. But it's probably just gonna die to a bolt. Next we have a Raven of Fell Omens for 1 generic and a black. You get a bird with flying. Whenever you commit a crime, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. This ability triggers only once each turn, and it is a 1/2. So definitely this definitely they are see or just keeping in mind like how things can be busted in terms of the design. So it seems like they're intentionally not making new commons that are just going to be complete format warping. So the fact that this only triggers once each turn doesn't make it very good in my opinion. It is okay. I mean, it can slowly drain your opponent, but generally I don't think it's probably good enough. If you could go infinite with this card, I would be all about it. And next we have Razzle Dazzler for 1 generic and a blue. You get a human wizard. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Razzle Dazzler and can't be blocked this turn. So generally okay, could maybe see it in some kind of is it blitz type of list. Though those type of decks really haven't been doing very well in the current meta, so it is a maybe another tool for them, but generally this card is though it's like it's decent. I just don't really see where it's going. All right, next we have Reach for the Sky for 3 generic and a green. We get an enchantment aura. It has flash and it enchants creatures. An enchanted creature gets +3/+2 and has reach. When Reach for the Sky is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. For 4 mana, I don't really see this game played, though everything that it does I think is good. Getting 3/2 and reach is good. Uh, it drawing you a card when it gets destroyed or when the enchanted creature dies is also good. So the things it does is good. I think if it just had a lower mana value and maybe didn't give as much toughness or power, like say it just gave 0+1, it cost you maybe 1 or 2 mana, this could probably see some play as flyers are something you have to deal with. Uh, but at 4 mana, I don't think it's gonna cut the mustard. Next we have Reckless Lackey for 1 red. It's a goblin pirate, has first strike and haste, and has an ability of 2 generic and a red. You can sacrifice it and draw a card and create a treasure token. It is a 1/2. If this was a 2/1, I think this would be probably good enough. It really synergizes a lot with Cold Red, so it's definitely something I'm maybe keeping my eye on. I don't think it's gonna make it into the deck as of yet, but it having first strike and haste is something that I like. And the fact that it can also sacrifice itself to draw a card, and then you also get a treasure token. It synergizes a lot with Goblin Blast Runner, so it definitely could see some play. I'm not really sure if it is. I'm kind of middle of the road with this card right now. I don't know if it will, but I also don't feel strongly enough that it won't. Next, we have Rodeo Pyromancers for 3 generic and a red. We get a human mercenary. Whenever you cast your first spell each turn, add 2 red, and it is a 3/4. Now that's kind of interesting. I mean, at 4 mana, I don't necessarily see it going into a lot of decks, though. If maybe newer deck comes out uh, with this card, like say Big Red, for example, this is just a way to ramp up your mana every time you cast a spell, which means you can just play more spells. And so you could probably generate a considerable amount of mana turns after this card comes out. Though playing this on turn 4 and just seeing it die to like a cast down, for example, that doesn't seem like a great play to me. Next, we have a Rooftop Assassin for 3 generic and a black. We get a Vampire Assassin, has flash, flying, and lifelink. When Rooftop Assassin enters the battlefield, destroy target creature an opponent controls that was dealt damage this turn. It's a 2/2, and this I don't think this is gonna see play. We've seen some other cards that are very much like this at the same mana value that already don't. So even with lifelink, I don't think this one will either. All right, so next we got Slick Shot Vault Buster for 2 generic and a blue. You get a human rogue that has vigilance. Slick Shot Vault Buster gets +2/+0 as long as you've committed a crime this turn. It is a 1/4 and probably won't see play either. Okay, next we have Spring Splasher for 1 generic and a blue. You get a Frog Beast. When Spring Splasher attacks, target creature defending player controls gets a -3/-0 until end of turn, and it's a 2/1. I mean, it's kind of okay, but not feeling very strong about it. Okay, we got Steer Clear for 1 white. It's an instant. Steer Clear deals 2 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. Steer Clear deals 4 damage to that creature instead if you controlled a mount as you cast this spell. So, guessing this is limited only since it really only synergizes with the set. So you'd really have to play within the set to be able to use this card. I mean, it is 2 damage to target attacking or blocking creature for 1 mana. It is an instant. So that side of it, I think, is pretty good. So it could be seen as a playable card in white. Though to really take advantage of this card and use it to its fullest effect, you will have to be playing within this set. And I don't really think the mechanics in this set are really going to be making waves in the format, at least anytime soon. Next, we have Sterling Keykeeper. For 1 generic and a white, you get a human mercenary. For 2 generic and tapping it, tap target non-mount creature. For it's a 2/2. And I would say most of the cards in the format are going to be non-mount creatures. However, the fact that you have to spend 2 mana and tap it doesn't really feel that great. It is 2 mana, so it is like evenly costed, at least in its mana value, to be playable, but I don't really think it will be. Next, we have Trained Aryinx. Not really sure how that's supposed to be pronounced. For 1 generic and a white, you get a cat beast mount. Whenever trained Yinks attack, man, they really, really want to mess with you, don't you? I'm not really sure if that is a reference to a real life thing or not. I've personally never heard of it, but I'm also kind of dumb. So whenever it attacks while saddled, it gains first strike until end of turn, and you scry one, and it is a 3/1. It has saddle 2. So the scry honestly is nice. It is a 2 mana 3/1, so not bad. When it becomes saddled, you get to scry one. Scrying is good. This card is decent. Could possibly find a home in White Weenie. But White Weenie already has a much better cards in the format, so I doubt we will be seeing it there. Next we have Tumbleweed Rising for 1 generic mana and a green. It's a sorcery. Create an XX green elemental creature token where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Also has plot for 2 generic and a green. So the plot cost here is actually more expensive than its mana value. And that's kind of wild. So it kind of incentivizes you to play later. Certainly if you play later, you will probably have bigger creatures on the battlefield, but you could also play it early and just make another creature. And at 2 mana, it's not bad, though this type of effect I don't really see going anywhere. It's just generally okay. Probably not, most likely not going to be in the format. I definitely see this being played and maybe limited only. Could find a place in some PDH piles, I guess. Generally not too enthused about it. Okay, next we have a Vengeful Townsfolk for 2 generic and a white. You get a human citizen. Whenever one or more other creatures you control die, put a +1/+1 counter on Vengeful Townsfolk. And it's a 3/3. So definitely has some synergy with aristocrats type of decks, though at 3 mana, it's a little rough. I don't know if I've seen an aristocrat type deck in the format that plays white. This could be a new deck. This could also find more of a place, I think, in PDH piles generally. And often when I'm looking at new common cards, that is where I think they're going to find a home, and generally not in any of the constructed decks. Okay, next we have Voracious Varmint. For 1 generic and a green, you get a Varmint, and I believe this is also another new creature type that we're seeing. It has Vigilance, and for 1 generic mana, sacrifice Voracious Varmint, destroy target artifact or enchantment is a 2/2. Honestly, I think this card is playable. You're certainly not going to be able to be destroying any artifacts or enchantments without, fast mana on turn 2, but on turn 3, it's probably a decent enough play. So, and it's a 2/2 village vigilance on top of that. So it can just be a 2/2 beater as well as helping you deal with artifacts or enchantments. And seeing as there are some very nasty artifacts and enchantments in a lot of both tier 1 and tier 2 decks, it definitely does something good in the format, though it is green, so I'm not really sure exactly where it's going to fit in since green generally has not been doing very well. The only deck that you generally see green being played right now is in Golgari Gardens, and they already have better cards that basically do the same thing. All right, and the last spoiler that we're looking at this week is Wanted Griffin. For 3 generic and a white, you get a Griffin that has flying. When Wanted Griffin dies, create a 1/1 red mercenary creature token with tap. Target creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery, and it is a 3/2. So generally, okay, definitely won't be played. Certainly haven't seen a lot of the spoilers that we looked at today that I would see being played in any decks. But that's gonna do it for today's video, guys. Love to hear what you think down in the comment section below. Are there any cards in here that you are excited about brewing around, or do you think they're absolute trash? Would love to hear your thoughts about that. As always, I hope you all are having a wonderful day, and I will see you all next time.